Welcome to week 4 of our book study, Creative Counterpart by Linda Dillow. Last week we started chapter 4 titled The Priority Planner, but we only got through the first 2 priorities, which was God and husband. And if you're following along in the book, we're going to be starting on page 60, and the third priority is our children. And this was very applicable to me and my life circumstances right now because of the 6 kids that God has entrusted to me right now. On page 61, she started talking about how, like mother, like daughter, and my husband always says that each child that we have, he calls them his little bundles of sanctification, because when you only have one kid, you really you don't have a lot to work on, and you only see some of your sins in little Johnny or little Sally. But the more kids you have, the more of those things that they pick up from you in your life, and usually they pick up your bad things and not necessarily the good things. And so we call them our little bundles of sanctification. One thing to remember is our actions speak so much louder than our words. If you say to your children, don't ever lie, that's like one of the worst things you can ever do. And yet they catch you in a lie, whether it be a really tiny white lie or just stretching the truth. What message are you sending to them? You're telling them it's okay to lie, even though you tell them it's not okay. In Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 through 7, it says, "And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." If you don't have a relationship with God, if you're not doing your devotions, and you're trying to impart truth to them, you're never going to be successful at doing that, because it is essential for you to have your relationship with God first, or else you can't teach your children about God. It's just that's how it works. And if you remember the priorities, what is your number one priority? Your first priority should be God. Your children are watching everything you are doing. What are you doing? Have you sat down and thought about that and say, what in my life would I want my children to imitate when they are older? Sometimes the answer is not going to be one that you want to hear, but those are the things you need to consider and do it prayerfully. Ask God to impress upon you those things that you need to change for the good of yourself and also for your children. Then under the priority of children, she has the section, "Are you really there?" And she relates about the story of how she was always home for her kids, but oftentimes she wasn't really truly there mentally, spiritually. Her ears weren't there. Yeah, she was taking care of the kids, but her mind was someplace else, whether it be church functions or the workplace or whatever is happening. So if your mind is not with your children, you are really not there for your children. There is no substitute for you. And I know that's sometimes hard for me to grasp, because someone else could do this job so much better than me. But God has put you in the place where you are, and there is no one that can take your place. And it is so important that you are there, not just physically, but mentally there as well for your children, willing to give that listening ear to them, whether they be teenagers or whether it be just a little 2-year-old that needs you to read a book to them. You need to be there for your kids. The next priority is our home. We see in the Proverbs 31 woman how she was a good housekeeper. She was tidy. And one thing that came to my mind is there are people that are, I think they call them born organized. And then there are people who really struggle with organization. And I don't know where I fit into that, because there's times that I struggle with organization, but it's actually more a factor of time than ability, because I like organizing, I enjoy it. It just seems like there's never enough time in the day to do it. And she said on page 65 that every home has an atmosphere. And what is your atmosphere like? And so I took a few minutes and I thought about it. And I guess the one word that I could come up with my home atmosphere right now is just chaotic. I don't know if there's any other way to describe it. I wish I could say it was loving and peaceful, and it's just this really mushy, great feeling, homey atmosphere. But it seems like right now it's just chaotic from the time we get up to the time we go to bed. And one of the things that I feel like I'm always striving to do is to just cut down on the chaos. And if you're following this video, you've probably seen that we do a daily vlog. And if you've watched any of those vlogs, you know that I have been trying to, actually my husband and I have been trying to do a decluttering, purging in our home, trying to make it less chaotic. And that has worked to a degree, but there's still, it's this element of chaos. And we don't know what exactly we're doing wrong, or maybe it's just the fact that we have 6 small kids that creates the chaos. But have you sat down to think about what is your environment when people walk into your house? And if you don't know what the environment is, maybe ask the people that come to your house most often and say, hey, what do you feel when you walk into my house? Linda also reminds us that we, as the moms and the women of the house, set the tone. And if mom wakes up grumpy, more than likely everyone else is sure to follow. And that is really hard to be able to put your emotions away and what you're feeling to just keep the household happy. Then Linda covers about how she used a priority. She called it her priority planner, and how she uses a calendar and making sure she keeps all of her priorities in order. And I really liked how she did this, and you can see her example here on page 68 and 69 right there. You have, let's see, her priorities. First one is God, followed by her husband, third, children, fourth is her home, fifth is yourself, and then 6 is outside the home. And then she writes down her goals for each of those priorities, and then she really divides it up. She has her menu plan for her meals, her daily schedule, and she puts in what she wants to accomplish. And that is really good for some people. I've done something similar in the past. I have not stuck with it because it really hasn't seemed to work well with me. One thing my husband and I have implemented is it's called a to-do list, and you've probably seen it if you watched our vlogs. It's about that long, and it has maybe 20-25 spaces to write down our to-do list. And before we had Grace, we were really good about doing our to-do list. In fact, we've been doing it for 3, 4, 5 years, where we would sit down at night and say, okay, what do we want to accomplish tomorrow? What are those priorities that we need to make sure we hit? And there was just something about having that list in front of you first thing in the morning, and you could just, when you did it, either cross it out or there was a little check box there. And for a long time, Art had a goal of, I think, 85 or 90% success rate. And he would, because he's the numbers guy, he would keep track of what his percentage completed for that day. And his goal was to always get as many as he could get done in one day. And that worked really well for us. And it really helped me to see, this is what I've accomplished. Even if my day feels like I've done nothing, I can actually see on a piece of paper what I've done. So maybe something like that would work for you if the priority planner idea doesn't work for you. Another thing that she mentioned is about the woman who, as a housewife, we have a lot of time on our hands. Yes, we're busy taking care of kids, but really, we have an entire day home. And how often do we really not use our time to the best of our ability? And in the past, I haven't done it I haven't done this since I had Grace, but I usually do it a couple times a year. I make myself accountable for every 5 minutes. If 5 minutes is too much for you, do 15-minute blocks. And then just plan on doing things for those blocks of time and write it down. So at the end of the day, you can see where you did really well and used your time wisely, or where you could have done better. And the days that I do that, it's amazing how much I accomplish, because a lot of times the computer, for me, sucks up a few minutes here and a few minutes here. And before you know it, I bet I could spend an hour or 2 hours throughout the day of wasted time on the computer. And as women at home, we need to be careful that we don't get sucked into other people's drama online, whether that be on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And I'm saying that hoping that my videos are a blessing to you, our daily vlog videos are a blessing to you. And I don't want those videos to be a waste of time. And so I'm hoping that they are helpful to you. But going back to those 15-minute blocks, try it and see how much you can get done in a day. And I bet you'll realize that there are lots of little spots where we're wasting time that we could use those more productively. And as a wife and a mother, that is what the Proverbs 31 woman is about, is being productive with the time that God has given her. And if you have that list of things you want to accomplish, when you have those blocks of time, you can say, hey, I've got 15 minutes. Let's see if I can start working on this project, or I can start working on dinner for tomorrow. And it really can help you have focus. And I say this a lot to myself, because these type of things are hard to remember when you're in the middle of this chaos, but they're really good exercises to do occasionally and just give you that encouragement that you are accomplishing stuff, even though it feels like all you do are read books to children and wipe bottoms and wipe running noses and, give water and prepare food and change diapers, and that whole works. Fifth priority is yourself. And that may sound very self-centered, but really you need to find a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but a little bit of time for you to energize yourself and to find that value back into yourself. Because if you don't, you will get burned out. The last priority in that list is doing things outside of the home. And I like what she said on page 75. Each woman is different. Each has varying responsibilities. One woman may have energy overflowing, while another begins to droop by 4 in the afternoon. What is important is that before God, you know yourself, your talents, and your emotional, spiritual, and physical capabilities. Please do not let other people put on you, whether it be guilt or tasks that you just can't handle. Go ahead and say no. It's not going to hurt them, and it's going to only benefit you. And you know what those limitations are. I've had to back out of a lot of things that I used to do because it was too much for me. And physically, I was exhausted. Emotionally, I was spent. And mentally, I was overwhelmed. We each need to honestly evaluate and plan according to our particular capacity and our set of circumstances. And lastly, she covers or reviews the 4 most common pitfalls. The first one is to substitute activity with God for a relationship with Him. And that goes back to our video last week. It is so important. Set that relationship with God first and foremost so you can be that woman that God wants you to be. The second pitfall is putting your children before your husband, and you guys all know how easy this is when your children are clamoring for your attention all day and your husband's gone, you come home, there's nothing left for him. But we need to make sure that our husbands know that he is our second priority and our children are underneath him. The third pitfall is a woman may not keep her outside activities as the last priority. It's so easy to appreciate the praise of others that we want to move that priority up towards the top because we're getting all this praise. The fourth pitfall is we need to realize that our priorities will change, our commitments will change every year, and we need to make sure we reevaluate our priority list all the time, so we are doing what God would want us to do and not just what other people would have us do. So that completes chapter 4. I hope you've enjoyed that chapter. It's been a lot of good material in that. Next week we will work on chapter 5. If you're new to these videos, welcome. You can see the playlist where you can see all of the other videos we've done so far. I also have a Facebook discussion group where you can find the link for that in the description below. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel for our weekly videos that I post every Friday, and I will see you next week for week 5. Have a great week, everyone.